Welcome to Will and Mark's Healthy Sports Obsession. I'm Will Hubner here with Mark Mashashik. We are two doctors of physical therapy, and we are here to answer your PT questions as well as give our take on current sporting events from a health perspective. As always, send your questions to willandmarkshso@gmail.com, and we will answer them on the show. Welcome to another episode. I'm here with Mark Mashashik. I'm Will Hubner. Today we're going to go over a couple listener questions that we have. We're going to go over heart rate training and how that relates to marathon training. We're going to go over an article on ESPN talking about the epidemic with youth sports and how there's a higher risk of injury. And then we're going to go through the AFC North fantasy predictions and also, fantasy and predictions about the AFC North. Right. So let's get right into it. We got a couple listener questions. The first one is from Joyce from Falls Church. So it's a little bit of a long one. So once upon a time, I had a dentist who was one of those good old boys from Texas. And as most doctor types do when they introduce themselves to a new patient, they will engage the patient in conversation. He told me of his dad being a preacher back in Texas, and from what he was saying, it sounded like his dad had a disciplinarian style of preaching. And so I asked if his dad was a Bible thumper, meaning someone who would remind you to always do the right thing. He said, "Oh no, my dad was a pulpit pounder." My question to you is, was historic Jesse James more of a do as I do or do as I say kind of guy? As almost always, I kid you not. Mark, let's start off with your answer to this one. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a curveball, Joyce. So finally we did do our research into historic Jesse James. It seems like he was an outlaw and a gangster. So would you say he's more of a do as you do or a do as I say type of guy, Will?
I would say do as I do, right? He was robbing banks. He was doing things. So
sounded like a bad guy, yeah. So we'll go do as you do on that one. As far as NFL Jesse James, hopefully he's catching some touchdowns in Detroit.
Yeah, he better be doing as he does.
Splitting time with the rookie, though. Yeah, he's a good football player. So if I had to choose who to be friends with, I would choose NFL Jesse James over historic Jesse James.
All right. So let's go to Pat from Burke, Virginia. He wants to know a little bit more about marathon training and heart rate training, kind of how heart rate training relates to marathon running. So, Mark, tell me a little bit about just marathon training in general. What do you think is a good way to kind of start out?
Just like you're training any other system, you're training both your musculoskeletal system, but as well as your cardiovascular system. So you just want to start out slow and not overdo it, and work your way up and build it. As far as like heart rate zone guides, what would you recommend, Will, as a heart rate? If someone was interested in heart rate training, what would you recommend as far as a zone for heart rate to start to train in?
Yeah, I think heart rate training's revolutionary in terms of a good way to train, especially for people out of shape that are trying to get into shape, and also people that are already in pretty good shape. So generally speaking, I think for kind of if you're going to be warming up and cooling down, you want to stay to around 55 to 65%. Kind of a nice, comfortable pace, something that's pretty easy to do. Some people can even do that with a moderate to brisk pace walk.
So, and we're talking about 55 to 65% of your max heart rate.
Max heart rate. So an easy way to do it is just 220 minus
your age.
Your age. They're definitely more accurate ones to do it. The best way to do it is with a stress test, but I'm guessing most of our listeners aren't going to go get a stress test to figure out what their max heart rate is. So just an easy way to do it, 220 minus your age to kind of figure out roughly where you're at. I think if you're training for a longer distance duration, though, you want to be training more at kind of this 65 to 75% rate.
Sure.
So it's still kind of a relaxed effort. You can hold a conversation, but you're starting to work a little bit and kind of get that muscle or that heart pumping a little bit more.
But you've already trained at the lower level. But if we're talking about marathon running, let's make baby steps. Let's do a 5K. Work towards the marathon.
Sure. Yeah. Ideally, if you're going to be actually going into starting to push yourself and go for more speed, then you're going to want to have to push yourself a little bit harder. So you're going to go for more 75 to 85% of that max heart rate. But again, like you're saying, you got to be in decent shape to where you can actually maintain that for a little bit of time. And if you're couch potato just starting out with running, I would not recommend training at that high of a rate unless you're doing more interval training.
Sure.
Which is what a lot of people are doing nowadays. I think it's interesting to note with kind of the interval training, the high intensity interval training. Tell me a little bit about what you think in terms of where your heart rate should be, and kind of the amount of time that you want to be in each heart rate zone, would you say?
Well, that depends on your goals. I mean, you can burn, if weight loss is the goal, you can burn a good amount of fat at a fairly low heart rate. So it just depends on your goal. I mean, if you work harder, you're gonna improve your ability to perform and reach your goal. If weight loss is the goal, then you'll lose more weight. But
Sure. I mean, the some of the programs that are out there, Beachbody Insanity, some of the CrossFit programs, they're working on 2.5, 3 minutes at a time, going all out, and then you get like 30 to 45-second break.
Sure.
So if you're somebody that's not in great shape, you're kind of using it as a way to get into shape, lose a little bit of weight. I mean, if you're working out for 2.5, 3 minutes as fast as you can go, your heart rate is going to shoot up through the roof, right? Like you're going to be hitting more of that 85, 95% of that heart rate. And then I don't think 30 to 45 seconds is enough time for you to actually get back into that safe training zone. I think that's where some of it starts to become unsafe from a cardiovascular standpoint. So I think you need to be in pretty good shape if you're going to be doing the high-intensity interval training programs, to just allow your heart rate time to recover.
yeah, just like anything else, though, you've got to find balance. You've got to work your way up to it. So high intensity, heart rate training, it's all finding the right balance for you, listening to your body, and building slowly to a healthy rate, to whatever your goal ends up being.
Yeah, I think the heart rate training, though, I mean, if you have a heart rate monitor on and you're using it, it's definitely a way to maintain safety. If you're not using it and you're doing a little bit too much, you're really going on symptoms. Am I getting any chest pain? Am I getting any shortness of breath? I think having an objective measure like a heart rate to kind of tell you kind of when you're about to be pushed a little bit too hard is a good thing to have to kind of pace yourself a little bit. I think it can be used as a safety measure.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right, awesome. So great questions, Joyce and Pat. Let's go over an ESPN article that came out about a week ago. It's called "These Kids Are Ticking Time Bombs, the Threat of Youth Basketball." And essentially what it's talking about is, overuse or, playing too much basketball at a youth level is actually creating all these injuries and not allowing people or players to make it through college or even get to the NBA. What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, well, I mean, so going into the article, not being a parent of a young kid or not going through the AAU system myself, I thought the article was going to be silly. I thought it was going to be like kids are overworking and kids just, in my opinion, kids just need to play. But after reading the article, it completely changed. These kids are playing way too much basketball, and they're only playing basketball. They're not playing other sports. So if you look at the rigors that basketball takes on the body, it's a jumping and landing sport. That's what it is. If you're only jumping and landing, you're setting yourself up for injuries and failure there. I think the biggest component to this is if you're playing only the same sport, that's the only way you're training, and you're doing it at multiple games a day, you're building to fatigue, and when you're fatigued, your motor control decreases, and then you're increasing the rate of injuries. So where if you had been getting the proper rest, maybe you don't sprain your MCL when you're 14 years old, but you play 3 games in a day, and all of a sudden you're tired and you get that sprain. Now once the sprain happens, MCL sprain, not that big a deal. But the collagen does change. It's scar tissue now. It's not the exact same tissue that it was before. So now we're looking at kids who are playing so much, they're building up these multiple injuries before they ever enter the higher levels. And the worry is that their NBA careers are burning out earlier because of just they're beating the heck out of their bodies.
Yeah, so I think you're touching on a point. So specialization, right? That's a huge term that's being used right now. Kids only playing one sport. The idea is if I play one sport as much as I can, then I'm going to have an edge on the next person. I'm going to be more skilled, more ready to go to the next level. Right. So they've done lots of research on this, and they've actually shown that for basketball specifically, people that specialize, meaning they are playing, I think it was 85% of their time is played in one sport, they are 2 to 3 times more likely to be injured than somebody that plays in multiple sports. So that's huge. I mean, we have objective data on that. But the lore of these, NBA careers.
We don't even need the objective data. It's just obvious. If you do the same thing, if you do the same thing all day, every day, you're going to break it. Change what you do and find ways to rest. It's important.
So this article is talking all about basketball, right?
Right.
I think we both agree that this is a problem across all sports.
All sports. And in our physical therapy practice, we see it a lot more in baseball. Just Northern Virginia, baseball is really big, and there's kids that are playing baseball 4 seasons a year. And I mean, I guess I can feel for the parents a little bit and for the kids themselves. They see Jimmy next door, and he's playing twice a year, and he's starting to improve on his skills above you, but you're getting a diminishing return at some point. So, what's your goal? Is your goal to play in college? Is your goal to be professional? I think a lot of kids have a dream of being a professional. If you're playing baseball on 4 seasons a year, I would say the risk that you are ruining that goal is higher than it is that you're going to achieve it. If you cut back to twice a year and you play some basketball and you use some other cross-training sports, I think you're setting yourself up for more success rather than less, even if you don't see those results immediately. Planting a seed, watering it, giving it some sun, letting it grow.
Yeah, I think it stems with parents, right? Like, parents are ultimately the ones that are putting the kids into multiple teams, into multiple programs. Every kid that's interested in baseball or sports is going to want to play as much as possible. I mean, I remember being out in the backyard playing basketball with my brother for 8 hours a day. It's just what we did, right?
Right.
And unless, it was dinner time or, there was something else to do, that's where we'd be. So I think parents, generally speaking, do a good job, but could be a little bit more aware of kind of how much their kids are playing. And I think that's the issue, is there's just not this awareness of there being a physical threat to the children's bodies. They think it's more just, they're having fun, let them have fun.
Kids can bounce back. The amount of rest, if a kid needs to rest, he's going to tell you he needs to rest. They can bounce back. It's just about doing it. The problems I think we see is when they're doing the same thing all day, every day. The article talks about Julius Randle's tibia fracture when he was a rookie. He had a stress reaction in his tibia, and one leg bumped into the other, and it broke the tibia. It's because he's jumping all day, every day, that his tibia was breaking down. If he was, I'm not saying golf's the right answer, but if he's playing golf one day a week, maybe he doesn't have that stress reaction. But now he's got differences in his anatomy that could lead to other injuries in his career. The article also cited that last year was the first time that the NBA ever broke 5,000 injuries, and then this year it was 5,200. So it is something that is growing and happening. I think some of the argument is just kids aren't tough the way they used to be. They're not like Michael Jordan, but the article also quotes that Michael's trainer said that at the end of after he won the finals every year, he would go pick up a golf club for 6 months.
Right, and would also say, he wouldn't take, people have this idea that he's the greatest competitor ever, and you put him in any competitive event and he's going to be going all out. It said that he would take it easy at practices,
I wonder how this brings in VR too. I think VR training could be really big for athletes in this near future, where when your body is at a time of rest, you can still be taking mental reps. I know there's some VR companies out there that work with sports. Definitely makes sense for pattern recognition. I don't know if that's arm slots for pitchers or quarterbacks reading defenses, but I think VR could be really big in the future of even point guards distributing the ball. Can you go through mental reps of where everyone is on the court to make a difference of the decision that you make? So I think VR could be a big tool in the future for helping with rest. Instead of taking 1,000 jump shots a day, do 500 and you do 500 in VR. Well, we could talk about mental fatigue too, so maybe too much is too much at some point.
Let's talk a little bit about, I think, what often gets, it's kind of right in front of our face, but nobody wants to really admit that it's going on, is the politics in sports, even youth sports. In terms of, there's a lot of money to be made in youth sports. So if we're talking about, coaches, and there's a lot of different motives for coaches wanting players to train at certain facilities or to be on multiple teams. I mean, there was recently in Northern Virginia, there was a coach who got in big trouble because he was having, he had a side business where it was baseball performance, come in there, do batting cages, you get pitch coaching, and all these things. But in order for you to be on the high school team, you needed to be on his travel team and you needed to be signed up to play at his facility, right? And the players that weren't doing that and they were playing in high school weren't getting playing time. So I think this happens quite often. I mean, we're talking to AAU basketball. You always hear about coaches being paid off and recruiters being paid off to influence kids to go to certain programs. I think that's part of what facilitates pushing these kids a little bit too hard as well. And I think we just kind of ignore it.
That's gross. And I mean, parents out there, you have to be able to recognize that, know what's best for your kid. I mean, I was not aware of that story. Like, if it was my kid, we're just playing baseball somewhere else. That's gross. I mean, capitalism makes the world go round, and I get it, but I just wouldn't want my kid to be a part of something like that. If baseball wasn't the sport, then maybe we just find a sport that works better. I'm not sure how to answer. That grosses me out. That, it's supposed to be about having kids having fun. It's supposed to be about learning to work in teamwork. I mean, that's what sports for kids, that's what it's about. It's about learning to work in teams and being able to do these things. To say that, like, you're going to make it about that, and now you're talking about hurting kids' bodies because you're trying to make money, is really gross.
Yeah. It's good to know, I do a lot of volunteer work. I know you do too, especially Little League baseball. I mean, there are so many different Little Leagues that I've gone to, so many different teams that I've gone to and said, hey, let me help you out. Let me screen these players for free. Let me give them some exercises to work on some of these things to try to prevent injuries. I mean, we see a lot of baseball players, basketball players, soccer players, all after they've had an injury, after they've had surgery.
Right.
Kind of it's a little bit too late. We wish we could have called them a year ago when they started to have these problems. And most of the time, I'm just so surprised nobody wants my help. Nobody really wants to. They think there's some sort of extra motive for me, and they just don't want to take the advice.
I think from an orthopedic standpoint, just APTA, we've got to push harder to say that, hey, you get your medical checkup once a year, you get your dental checkup once a year. If you got a kid in sports, he should be getting a physical therapy checkup once a year. Particularly if you've got your kid in 4 sports, he should be seeing a physical therapist once a year to make sure that he isn't what the article's called, these kids are a ticking time bomb. You need to get them into someone who knows what they're talking about this and evaluate them to make sure that it is okay. And then, I mean that's how we can help them to say, I really think you're at a level where your performance looks good if you play baseball twice a year and we get you into hoops once a season. We get you into just whatever the kid wants, just a cross-training program. But, not identifying the problem is a major problem. If you get your kid in 4 sports and he's never seen a physical therapist, I think you're crazy.
Yeah, and I know more and more Little Leagues are starting to come out. Like, we're working with DC Little League. Mike Johnson's been a big proponent of trying to make that Northwestern DC Little League safer. So guys like him, I know Seth Blee does a lot of volunteer work out in Northern Virginia. So there's people that are trying to help. And if you're a parent listening right now, or if you have a kid and you're thinking about, well, where would I send him to? What do I do?
Email into us.
Email us.
We'll get you that answer.
So
we'll find the right practitioner for you. But no, exactly. I was really bummed out reading the article that I didn't think it was a good problem. I just treat a lot of kids and they like to play, but it bums me out that like they're almost being taken advantage of, or they don't know any better. It's a bummer.
Yeah, it is. Ultimately, I think we get them into sports to have fun, and then somewhere along the line we start to lose that focus.
Right.
And
it shifts.
The interesting thing is that the people that are at most risk are the better players. Like, if you're a baseball player and you're in Little League, there's a 1 out of 10 chance that or 1 out of every 10 players from Little League is going to even play in high school. So chances are that there's 1 or 2 guys on that team that are really good. They're the ones who are going to be in multiple teams. They're the ones who are going to be throwing a little bit extra. They're the ones who are going to kind of be put at this major risk. So the ones that have the highest chance to kind of make it to the next level are the ones probably that are being overworked the most.
Yeah, I want to say more about it. I don't know what else to say. Just cross-train your kids. Don't specialize them. It's not ideal for them. And in the long term, if your goal is a professional athlete, you're setting them up for failure. So you're literally going against your own goal. Get in to see a PT and get some help.
Moving on.
Yeah.
AFC North.
AFC. Let's do the basketball guy that's ripping it up in China. We had a question.
Oh, Isaiah Austin. So I don't know.
I just want your opinion. Isaiah Austin, diagnosed with Marfan syndrome at the NBA Combine, and was deemed not eligible to play in the NBA. Has gone on in China and he's ripping up. He's 32 points per game. But Well, first, what is Marfan syndrome, and what is your opinion of letting him play in the NBA?
So Marfan syndrome essentially is a connective tissue issue. So it's a mutation of one of the growth factors, and essentially it makes you susceptible to the biggest issue is going to be with your arteries, right? Like having
basically all your connective tissue is too loose, and if your aorta is too loose, the worry is that the blood pressure against it would cause it to cause an aneurysm or burst.
Correct. So because of that, the NBA is saying you are ineligible to play. We will not have you play in the NBA because we think it is too high of a risk for you to play. There's, the risk is death, right?
Right.
So Isaiah Austin says, well, I want to play basketball. So he goes and plays in China, and he's scoring like 30-some points a game, 10 rebounds, and he's getting a lot of attention right now because of this TBT tournament, the basketball tournament, where it's winner takes all, $2 million. And they're on ESPN, and he's having a really good tournament. He looks great.
Right.
So starting to talk about, let me back into the NBA, and the NBA is sticking to their guns saying, you're ineligible, we're not going to allow you to play.
I think it's scary. I think the NBA remembers Reggie Lewis when he died in '93, and that's a big deal. Like that was a huge deal. The guy died on their court playing basketball, and I think that I don't think it's on the NBA. I think it's on whoever advises the NBA from a cardiac standpoint is saying like they actually believe that he's at risk of dying on the court.
So do you think if he, if Isaiah is completely aware of the risks and he chooses to say, I want to play, his argument is that he's been playing for 2 years.
Yeah, the downside is the NBA is saying we think it's too dangerous for you to play basketball, but there's no law that says you can't let someone play basketball. You can just say you can't play in our league.
Right, in the NBA.
So he's still doing it. And so if you went to Stern today and been like, hey, I'm going to do this regardless. Silver. Stern Rung League. So if you went to Silver today and say, like, I'm going to do this every day, why don't you let me do it in your league? What's his answer going to be? He's like, I guess you're right. I mean,
yeah. He's been playing high-level basketball for over 2 years since the diagnosis, and to his belief, he's getting healthier, he's getting stronger, his cardiovascular ability is increasing, his endurance.
Right.
So he's saying, I'm going to keep playing, let me play in your league, and they're saying no. What do you think? Just ethically.
I think I'm on his team with it. If he was my patient, so we get a lot of Ehlers-Danlos patients. It's supposed to be a rare disease, but we find it more and more, and a lot of people are undiagnosed with it, very similar to Marfan syndrome in that it's a connective tissue disorder. We're worried about aortic aneurysm. If someone wants to do something and they're aware of the risks, I don't have the stats on how many people with Marfan syndrome get aortic aneurysm or the risk of increasing the pressure in your heart and that. But I think if you present him with those stats and he says, yeah, I love my life, I love basketball, I want to do it, I think as a healthcare practitioner, I would do everything I could to help him do that.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to need a lot of treatment to get as strong as he can to really make sure he's in a great, in great shape to play basketball. I think it's
getting in shape is the risk for him. But if he's aware of that risk and we have numbers and we can give it to him, he says, I see the risk. I'm a human being. I want to live my life. I want to do this. I think I'm saying, okay, let me try to help you do it. And that's me putting in risk too. Like I don't want to have someone that I'm advising have a major event like that. But we know it's possible. But like, what are you going to do? Are you going to get out of your house? You're going to lock them in a cell and say you can't move because we're worried you're going to die?
Well, I mean, from Adam Silver's perspective, it's a huge liability. I mean, that's going to risk some of the reputation of the NBA as being we're doing
that's
whatever
what happened with Reggie Lewis. So I see his reason for making the decision, but I'm saying if I was a family member or a healthcare practitioner advising him, I think I wouldn't say don't live your life. I would say you know the risk. If it's 50%, whoa, not worth it. If it's 20%, whoa. If it's 5%, maybe like, well, you want to live your life. You want to play basketball against the greatest basketball players in the world. That's important to you. I mean, you can't to tell someone that the time that they have here is not valuable. Like if he knew he was going to die in 5 years from it, to say that that's more valuable than just laying in a jail cell for 10 years. It's not fair to say. That's his decision. So I would put it to him.
Right. I think from a health perspective, we're saying we'll do everything we can to help you. It's ultimately, Isaiah, your choice. You have the research. We'll present you with all the information.
Right.
From Adam Silver's perspective, he's saying, hey, too risky for our league. Wish you the best. I don't have a good answer for it, but it is interesting that we're talking about it right now.
I wonder if he can litigate. I wonder if he can sue the NBA. Maybe he should. Maybe he should sue the NBA to try to get into it.
I don't know. Email us your thoughts. If you have any ideas about
We'd love to hear your
where you
opinions
think
on
it
it,
should
or give us feedback on our comments about that. Okay, now we're moving on.
AFC North.
AFC North.
Let's get right to, in my opinion, the best franchise out there, the Baltimore Ravens.
Let's start with the breakdown. Just go through our records. Who you got winning the NFC North and what record?
The NFC North this year, just based on records.
I'm sorry, AFC.
So we're going with the Browns. I have the Browns at 11-5.
I got the Browns at 10-6. I got them also winning.
Okay. Right behind them, I got the Ravens at 10-6.
I got the Steelers at 9-7.
I also have the Steelers at 9-7.
And then I've got the Ravens coming in at 7-9.
Ravens at 7-9.
Yeah, Ravens at 7-9. That's me giving you your homer medicine.
See, I went 10-6, being a little bit more critical, saying, "Hey, I got to be unbiased." So I could easily see them being 12-4, but let's go. I got Bengals at 5-11.
5-11. We're in agreement. High
5-11.
five on that one.
So we both agree Bengals are going to be.
Bengals are going to struggle.
Bengals are going to struggle. All right, but I mean, for mine, I got 11-5, 10-6, 9-7. Anybody can win this division besides the Bengals.
The hype is on the Browns. I think people are saying Super Bowl already. I think they're a step away from the Super Bowl, but I think they're a playoff team.
All right, so we both got the Browns win the division. Let's start with them. So, where do you have Baker Mayfield?
Baker, he's in tier 3 for me. So tier 1, it would be Luck and Watson. Baker, ooh, you know what? I still got to put Rodgers at tier. I'm not getting Baker in a lot of drafts. I think in a 12-team league, he is in that middle of the pack of good quarterbacks, just behind Rodgers with Russell, Wilson. He's going like round 6 and 7 and in pro leagues right now, which means he'll go earlier once we're drafting with the non-pros. That's too rich for my blood. I believe he's going to do it. I haven't seen him do it yet. So I like Baker. I love him. But he's a little too rich for my blood to use a 6th or 7th round pick on.
All right, what do you think of Nick Chubb?
Love him. People are afraid of him because they know that that Hunt's coming week 9, and there's a bye in there, so it's like not till week 10. Nick Chubb, if Hunt wasn't there, I think he'd be a first-round pick. With Hunt there, I've got him more at the back of the 2nd round, early 3rd round. You got to remember, you got to win your league from day one. So if you think you can cakewalk your league, then you just want to plan for the playoffs, and you can do that. But if you're in a competitive league and you got to grind, you want to win week 1. Nick Chubb is a very good running back on a very good offense.
So talk about Kareem Hunt. If you draft Nick Chubb, do you automatically have to draft Kareem Hunt?
No, I wouldn't. I think it depends. Again, depends on the league. But to stash Kareem Hunt for 9 weeks on your bench when you know every year people draft guys that they want to stash, and then week 2 they're like, my quarterback got hurt. I've got to pick someone up. I don't think you can stash him for that long. Kareem Hunt is not draftable to me.
Interesting. Okay, so we all know about Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. Any other receivers you think that are worth drafting on this team?
Yeah, we haven't seen it from yet, but the early reports on Callaway in camp is that he looks good. I'm probably not drafting Callaway, but I'm keeping my ears open. In a very, very deep league, he could be ad, but I'm keeping my ears open week 1, week 2. He could be an ad. Not a lot of balls left to go around with Odell, Jarvis, Njoku. They throw to the running backs. So it's tight, and nobody likes Jarvis Landry right now. Everyone thinks that he's gonna.
Really?
He's at a value at this point, just because they think Odell's gonna take too much of the share. They think Odell's gonna run the offense, and let's not forget these guys played together at LSU. They're really good friends. Jarvis disappointed last year for a lot of people, and they just think there's gonna be regression from that. But at this point, you can almost get Jarvis at a steal. You can get him almost he's very close to being able to be attainable as a backup receiver. So you've got to find value where it is and go get it. I like the defense too. I'm a streamer on defense, but if you've got a league where there's a reason to keep a defense, it's a good defense to have.
All right, good. So we both got Browns winning the division. Let's go to the Ravens. So Lamar Jackson, where do you see him?
So let's just talk about the style that they're going to do this year first. Is they just only want to run the rock. They want to run the rock into the ground. They want to run Lamar Jackson into the ground. They want to run Mark Ingram into the ground. They want to run Gus Edwards in the ground and Justice Hill in the ground. They want to run the ball. And these games are going to be an hour long. So that's not good for fantasy. It doesn't build a lot of time for stats. But Lamar Jackson has a outside chance to rush for 1,000 yards. Is it possible? I think it's possible, but I think the passing is going to be ugly. Talk to me about the receivers a little bit.
Right, so I think the big guy they got, Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, he had that Liz Frank injury, so we're not sure. We haven't really seen him yet, and we don't really know how that's going to
scary injury for NFL players. It's one that some people have struggled with.
It is. I mean, tell me about, do you see him having any fantasy value this year?
I don't, in that, like we said, they want to run the ball. I think he's a great player, and I think he's in there, and the reason they drafted him is to get the safeties back so that Lamar and Ingram and Hill and Gus can run the football. That's why he's there. So I think he has a tremendous impact on this team, but I don't think it translates to necessarily great fantasy odds. I think if you're a Ravens guy and you're a believer and you think that it is going to work out for him, then you could take him very, very late. Mentioned Willie Snead still there too. Miles Boykins, the big guy out of Notre Dame. And then you got the two tight ends. As a pass-catching option, if you're punting on tight end again, I think Mark Andrews had a fantastic rookie year, and I'm not going to draft him, but if you're a Ravens guy and you believe in him, I think you can take him in the last round. I'm going to keep my fantasy waiver wire idea open. If I'm hurting at tight end, that Mark Andrews could be an option.
Yeah, I like Hayden Hurst too. Before he got hurt last year, he seemed to have chemistry with Lamar Jackson in some of the preseason games. I think if anybody, Marquise Brown's going to be your kind of boomer bust guy. He could have some games where he's getting 80-yard touchdowns based on their system. You know, if he's going to get one-on-one coverage, he could easily beat a cornerback.
I think he's the new Deshaun Jackson, but Deshaun Jackson's in a passing offense, and Marquise Brown is not. O'Boyle rules.
Let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yep.
So Ben Roethlisberger comes back year after year. Does he have any fantasy value for you?
Yeah, if you believe in Ben, you can draft him. Plays well at home, doesn't play well on the road. But he's a dime a dozen quarterback. I mean, just those late round quarterbacks, you can take anyone if you want. If you wait on quarterback, Ben is one of your options.
All right, we talked about in a previous podcast about Juju kind of being the only guy in Pittsburgh, and he's going to be drawing double teams, so we haven't really seen that because Antonio Brown's been getting the coverage. And is he good because he's getting kind of the lesser coverage?
Yeah.
But talk to me about kind of target share and what he's going to be
doing. A lot of mouths
with.
to feed. You got to make up for Antonio Brown's lost targets. So I think Juju's just going to see so many balls that he's going to be a wide receiver one. You can draft him at the end of the first round. You can draft him early. I'm very excited to get him in the tier after the top three receivers. After Hopkins, Adams, and Julio, you got Juju, Tyreek Hill, and Odell, Michael Thomas. I think they're all in that same order.
Outside of Juju, you got Moncrief, James Washington, Trey Griffey. What's the interesting fact there?
Oh, yeah, Ken Griffey Jr.'s son is on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Sure, cool. Eli Rogers, Ryan Switzer. Anybody else have any fantasy value?
Probably not right now. We'll readdress at camp. If someone emerges as the number two, they'll have value. I hope it's James Washington, just because we kind of know what Rogers and Moncrief are. If Washington can step forward, he would be interesting. Vance the Dance at tight end. You mentioned the nasty stiff arm. He's had opportunities before and never seemed to step forward, but there are still, like I said, there's balls to go around. So,
and then talk to me about James Conner with the, running back committee is what Tomlin's saying.
He's not saying committee. He's just saying he's gonna spread it out more. The Pittsburgh Steelers never do that. I don't believe that that's going to happen. Jalen Samuels will get on the field because he can run, catch, and block. It's just a valuable person to have that can do multiple things. Benny Snell was a fourth-round pick. I think he's a great fill-in if Connor's out, but I'm still buying the Connor juice. I'm on board. I still like him as RB1. I don't think we're going to see as much of a spread as he's saying.
Okay, and we both had Steelers at 9-7.
Correct.
All right, moving on. Bengals both had 5-11.
Boo.
All right, so talk to me about Andy Dalton.
Yeah, Dalton. What about him?
I don't know. I'm not a big Andy Dalton fan. I think you know that.
Yeah, why not, though?
He's a mediocre quarterback on a mediocre team.
Yes, he's the Jeff Fisher of quarterbacks.
I'm not falling for him. I've had him a couple years. He's always been my backup. Do I start him? Do I not? He's got A.J. Green. How could you not get fantasy points with throwing to A.J. Green?
He's had a top 5 fantasy year in the past as a quarterback. So why do we have him at 5-11? Just the Bengals seem to have not improved on a team that wasn't great last year. You got the offensive line injuries. They lost their rookie Jonah Williams to his shoulder surgery. Clint Boland retired. But we do like some fantasy options in the team. A.J. Green in the 3rd round is an unbelievable value. Tyler Boyd as a guy that you can get coming off your bench as a receiver who, he performed well even with A.J. Green on the field. So I think these are good options. And then we look at the running backs. Joe Mixon's a stud. I don't like that he lost the offensive lineman. I think he's in line for a great year, though.
And he's a kind of do-it-all type of guy. He can be out there first, second, third down. They do have Gio Bernard, who tends to get some of that third down.
I think Gio will get 5 catches, 5 carries a game, and it's Joe's show. Otherwise, he's there to spell him. If Mixon goes down, I think Gio can step right in and be a poor man's version of it. He's probably a little bit better pass catcher, a little bit worse on running downs, but they both can do both. Sleeper for the long term, Rodney Anderson, another running back out of Oklahoma that's a super stud, was hurt for most of his career there. Maybe not this year, but at some point, I think you could see Rodney Anderson emerge if he can stay healthy.
What about John Ross? Super fast guy. Had some injuries last year.
Fastest guy ever in the history of the NFL, technically. 4.22.
Does he have any value on this team?
No. I think he needs to restart. He said he's trying to reinvent himself. Of course you're going to say that. He just has never stepped forward and produced. He's gotten hurt. If I were John Ross, I'd kind of want to get out of Cincinnati. I'd want a new start. I think if he reinvents himself, he's got to go to the Dallas Cowboys, to the San Francisco 49ers. I think he's got to find a new team. I'm not buying him. Eifert, if you're punting at tight end again, another tight end punt, you take him in the last round. He's been very successful in fantasy before, can't stay healthy. If you don't like Dalton and they're running toward the end of the season and they're 4-8, something like that, I think at some point we could see Ryan Finley coming to the field. 4th round pick out of NC State. Reminds me of Daniel Jones, the guy that went in the 1st round very early. I don't think they're that different. I think he's pretty talented quarterback to get in the 4th round. If Dalton is not playing well and the season's in the tanker, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Ryan Finley on the field at some point.
You want to hear my bold projection?
I do.
Andy Dalton, this will be the last year that he starts for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think they're going to be so bad that they get a top draft next year and they're getting Tua, Fromm, or Herbert. And I think it's going to make them a better team.
I don't think that's that bold of a prediction. I think if we're talking to our Bengal listeners out there, they not only do they want that, I think that they're hoping it happens.
Well, he still has 2 more years left, so he's got this year and the next year. Andy Dalton, in terms of his contract.
Right, so if they stink this year, you see what Finley has. If it's not Finley's not the guy, you bring him in and you keep him under Dalton for a year. That's fine. He probably takes Dalton's job. You get Tua, he's going to take Dalton's job.
All right, so just to recap, we both have the Browns winning the division. We flip-flop on Ravens and Steelers, and then we both have the Bengals being the worst team in the division.
And then we've got the fantasy news of Tyreek Hill. Do you think Tyreek Hill is a first-round pick now that the NFL has claimed him that he is not going to be suspended this year?
I think he will go in a lot of leagues at the end of the 1st round, early 2nd round. I think he's going to have a little bit of a drop-off, mainly because I think Patrick Mahomes is going to have a little bit of a drop-off. I think
regression is expected there.
Right, exactly. 2nd year, a lot of game planning, that sophomore slump. But having said that, a sophomore slump from a guy who just had record-setting
5,000 yards and 45 touchdowns.
I think he's still going to have a solid year, so don't.
I think he's going to have 4,800 yards and 38 touchdowns. It's just not going to be.
But I just think there's so many mouths to feed, which I know they did it last year, but with Kelsey and they're losing Kareem Hunt, so I guess there's a little bit of running back play there.
Yeah, but it was the same offense with Damian Williams. It's Andy Reid's offense. It doesn't matter who the running back is.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's going to be tough for Hill to get the same amount of touches he got last year.
I got him at about the same.
I'd rather have Odell. I'd rather have Juju.
I put him at about equal. I think I'd rather have Hill over Odell. I think I go Hill over Odell. Yeah.
All right. Well, keep sending us in the questions. Will and Marks, HSO@gmail.com. We answered 2 today. We'll answer more on our next podcast, but keep them coming.
Keep them coming. All right.
All right, thank
over
you.
and out.